Director, Ecological Think Tank, Health of the Mother Earth Foundation, and head office in the Benin City, Nigeria. So we welcome to you, sir, on behalf of the Parul University, on behalf of the Parul University Management, on behalf of the Parul University Vice Chancellor, sir, and the President, sir, and the Registrar, sir. We welcome to you, sir. Now I over to you, Dr. Sonali Naran, for the introduction and start of the webinar. And now I over to you, Dr. Sonali, please.
Thank you for joining us, Nimo. Nimo Base is the director of the ecological think tank Health of Mother Earth Foundation with head office in Benin City, Nigeria. He is member steering committee of Oil Watch International and was chair of Friends of the Earth International from 2008 to 2012 and executive director of Nigeria's Environmental Right Action from 1993 to 2013. He is also a member of Action Research Network for the well-being of the economy in Africa, and his books include "We Thought It Was Oil, but It Was Blood" and poetry. And next is "I Will Not Dance to Your Beat" poetry, and "To Cook a Continent: Destructive Extraction and the Climate Crisis in Africa" in 2012, and "Oil Politics: Echoes of Ecological War" in 2016. And he also writes regular blogs in on his link that we will share in the chat box. So I would like Nimo to start his presentation now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonali. Thanks a lot to the university for organizing this seminar and for giving me the space to share on Ecocide law for environmental justice. It is a very big privilege for me because we're having a lot of activities in the world today that are causing serious environmental damage. And because there's no international law that holds those who are causing this damage responsible, it is more or less taken as though it is normal, as though it is something that is permissible. The photograph on my first slide shows the protest at Marikana when workers were killed in South Africa because they asked for better working conditions. Now, this is important to us because we find that labor sometimes is discounted. It's not, actions are not taken to protect the needs of workers. And if that cannot be done for workers who speak out and complain about how they are being treated, you can imagine how corporations and individuals treat Mother Earth just because she cannot speak back to humans. Next slide, please. So the next thing we want to do is to define the crime. Now, to define ecocide. Ecocide has been defined as, we could take it to mean extensive damage to the environment, often impacting the soil, the air, and water of affected areas in an irreversible manner. In other words, the damage is so extensive, we cannot even conceive the possibility of restoring that environment in one lifetime. And there are many places on Earth today that have suffered such heavy damage. Stop Ecocide Foundation, which is the #1 group that is promoting the creation of the crime of ecocide, defines ecocide as mass damage and destruction of ecosystems, harm to nature, which is widespread, severe, or systematic. This is very important because a lot of the harms we see, a lot of the damage we see in the environment, they don't happen by accident. They're happening because corporations and individuals and governments find it convenient to externalize environmental cost, to create damage so as to produce value for either for the corporation or for somebody without regard to the damage done to the planet or the damage done to communities in whose territory these activities is being carried out. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of international crimes, when we talk about the Rome Statute, which has been endorsed by 123 countries in the world, has four recognized international crimes. These are the war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and crime of aggression. Now, when these crimes were being formulated, when they were being recognized, the crime of ecocide was also on the table, was also being discussed, but that didn't pass. And we can all just imagine why it wasn't passed, or why the discussion on ecocide did not go forward. One of our guests is that there were some vested interests who would not want to be held accountable for damage that comes from their activities, or activities of agencies from whom they benefited from their output. There are so many. There were, in terms of war crimes and genocide, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression. Each of these sometimes also have environmental components. But I've also heard about some military organizations having seminars and workshops on environment-friendly warfare. This just doesn't make sense. How could you have warfare that is environment-friendly? You go to bomb cities, bomb communities, bomb forests, or use chemicals to destroy the habitats and trees and all kinds of places, and you are at the same time looking for how to carry out warfare in an environmental friendly way. How would that be possible? That you kill just the humans and not affect the environment? This is very far-fetched. It just shows that the notion of war itself ought to be made obsolete by now in the world. So we have four crimes. And ecocide, the campaign for ecocide law is to make ecocide law the fifth crime internationally recognized under the International Criminal Court, so that those who commit ecocide can be held accountable under international criminal law. Next slide, please. A lot of what we see as ecocide come from extractive activities of various kinds. This could be mining, it could be oil extraction, it could be coal extraction, it could be gas, fossil gas extraction. The damage that comes from these sectors can be extremely widespread. I come from the Niger Delta in Nigeria, where commercial oil extraction has been going on since 1956. That is more than 60 years now. Some of the environments in the region is so badly damaged by oil pollution, by oil spills, by gas flaring, which is giant gas furnaces burning 24 hours every day for decades. The damage is so extensive. Human life has been made almost impossible to survive. And the people struggle within the legal systems in the country, within the legal system in the home countries of these corporations, but the impact is not the same as would be the case if ecocide had already been accepted as a crime in international law. Next slide, please. I believe that when ecocide is accepted, it would reduce. It would be an incentive for those who are harming the planet with impunity, for those who don't respect the rights of Mother Earth to maintain her natural cycles, to maintain her integrity in terms of genetic makeup, in terms of all the services that she is providing to humans and other species. Unless if the law comes into being, and many countries are already considering ecocide as a law, but when it becomes acceptable, then it will be a big incentive for those who are now trashing the planet, and we believe that things would change dramatically. And this is why we are proposing, and we joined the campaign, that ecocide should be recognized as a fifth international crime that can be tried in the International Criminal Court of Justice. Next slide, please. Now, one of the major proponent who has really been promoting ecocide as a law, as a crime, is Polly Higgins. She passed away 2 years ago, unfortunately. She and Jojo Mehta together formed Stop Ecocide Foundation, and they push for the United Nations, for the International Criminal System to accept ecocide as a crime and to have a law governing this. Right now, there are teams of lawyers who are meeting to make a legal definition of ecocide. And I believe by next month, by the month of June 2021, that will become public information. So we expect to see debates around the world about how that law should be defined and how it could be taken up when it is infringed. So Paul Higgins said, and this is important quote, "The rules of our world are laws and they can be changed. The rules of our world are laws and they can be changed. Laws can restrict or they can enable. What matters is what they serve. Many of the laws in our world serve property. They are based on ownership. But imagine a law that has a higher moral authority, a law that puts people and planet first. Imagine a law that starts from first, do no harm, that stops this dangerous game and takes us to a place of safety." This quote is powerful, and it says a lot of things. Many laws are made to protect property, to protect people who have property, to protect capital, and to protect those who are running the system. But we need to have laws that have higher moral authority, laws that consider that we should do no harm, laws that respect humans, every human being, and laws that respects Mother Earth, and laws that respects all the species, because we are all interdependent. And this is why in 2010, at the People's Summit on Climate and the Right of Mother Earth in Cochabamba, Bolivia, the draft Declaration of the Right of Mother Earth with obligations of humanity, of mankind, was drafted and thereafter submitted to the United Nations. We're hoping that that law, that declaration will be made one day by United Nations, and that all nations will find ways to integrate it into national laws. Next slide, please. From discussions with legal experts, of course, in the way, next slide, the way laws are run generally in the world, we do understand that ecocide would not be retroactive. Ecocide would only begin to be operational at a time when it comes to effect. Can we move to the next slide, please? I hope my internet is still functioning. Right, thank you. I just said that ecocide would not be retroactive. And so, unfortunately, all the crimes committed against the environment, against the people, against Mother Earth so far may not be covered by this law until the law comes into effect. That is where laws operate, and this is why there's an urgency to make sure that this crime is recognized and the law comes into effect. Now, in the next few slides, I'm going to be showing you some crime scenes that should have benefited from this law if you already had it. And go to the next slide, please. The next slide shows one crime scene in the Niger Delta, where I live and work. What you're seeing is a creek that has been contaminated by oil pollution so extensively that government has only just begun a process of cleanup, but this pollution has been there for several years. And there's a signpost erected there for public notice that everyone should avoid this environment. People should not go there. People should, because it's dangerous. But of course, this is the communities living alongside this river, and they don't have public water supply. They still have to go to the water covered with crude oil. They have to eat fish from that contaminated water. And of course, you can see how extensive the damage is. This is a scene, a location that has already suffered from Ecocide. The next slide. The next slide also shows a river covered with oil and oil pollution. And the community people woke up in the morning, went to the river, either to fetch water or to carry out some domestic activities, only to find that the entire water body is contaminated by oil spill from the activities of oil corporations. And because there's no ecocide law, they just have to depend on national laws, or otherwise they have to push to international, to go to the home country of these corporations to seek justice. Next slide. The next slide is very interesting. There is a location where oil spill had gone as far as by 2011. Oil spill at this location had gone down 5 meters into the ground. By the time this excavation was made, before the place was remediated last year, the oil spill had gone as deep as 10 meters into the ground, which shows that when these accidents or crimes are committed, if action is not taken immediately, the impact becomes more deep-rooted, deep-seated, and more widespread, which is why we need this law to ensure that those who commit the crime are held accountable immediately the crime is discovered, so as to have a chance of restoring the environment and also making it livable for communities. Next slide, please. The next slide shows another, of course, a water body covered with crude oil. But why I'm using this slide is to show us how widespread oil spills have been in Nigeria. And oil spill is also very widespread in places like Ecuador, in like South Sudan, and many other locations. Now, in 2018 and 2019, according to Nigeria's National Oil Spills Detection and Response Agency, there were 1,300 oil spills, giving an average of 5 oil spills every single day. As we speak right now, there's an oil spill happening somewhere in the Niger Delta. In fact, there was a blowout in an offshore oil platform in April 2020. It blew out, there was a big fire, an oil spill, and that fire is still burning 1 year afterwards, not been stopped. So this clearly is ecocide, damaging aquatic ecosystems, damaging livelihoods, affecting communities who depend on aquatic resources for livelihood, and somebody should be held accountable for this. Next slide, please. The next slide shows giant furnaces, an example of a furnace that is burnt in the oil fields of the Niger Delta and elsewhere. Up to $2 billion worth of gas, natural gas, is burnt and wasted every year in the oil fields. And this is because in the 1960s, the companies, when they were questioned about this activity, said that they were burning the gas because there was no market for natural gas. That is not true today, if one were to go by that argument. But this exercise, this kind of crime still goes on, pumping a lot of toxic elements into the atmosphere, including sulfur and nitrogen oxides that mix with moisture in the air to send down acid rain. The elements in these toxic flames release a lot of greenhouse gases, adding to global warming. They also have elements that cause cancers, skin diseases, bronchitis, asthma, and so many other diseases. And so they literally burning the sky. They also collectively affect agricultural productivity in the area. And this is a crime that somebody should be held accountable for. By 1994, the Nigerian government outlawed gas flaring, but at the same time allowed the corporations to pay a fine if they must continue flaring. And so they pay the fine because the fine is nothing compared to the value of the gas. And some of us are campaigning that for anyone to burn this gas in this kind of reckless manner, they should be made to pay the commercial value of that gas. That would be a big incentive for them to stop their misbehavior. Next slide, please. In all these harms, including if you look at mining sites, I'm sure in India you have examples of mining pits, massive mining pits that can be seen with satellites from space, from the pictures that we see from where mines operate, it's very easy to see that even though the money can be set aside for closing the mine at the end of the mine lifespan of the mine, those mine pits cannot in the short term, even in the long term, return to normal for what the environment was before the mines were excavated. So every mine pit literally is a crime scene, and those who engage in reckless extraction should be held to account. There's been a lot of resistance to the degradation that we find around the world, not just in the Niger Delta. I'm just using these pictures as an illustration. People are campaigning against, they're resisting, they're litigating. There are many cases that have been decided, cases ongoing in courts, including recent cases that were ruled on in the Netherlands against Shell, the case that was brought by 4 farmers from the Niger Delta, a case also against Shell in the UK, United Kingdom, where the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom agreed that the subsidiaries of international corporations can be held accountable for crimes committed. The headquarters can be held accountable for crimes committed by their subsidiaries in other countries. That is very significant. It's also the case the kind of decision that was made against Vedanta, which is a copper mining company with headquarters in the United Kingdom. A subsidiary in Zambia polluted the communities, rivers with toxic elements from the copper mines, and the court ruled, yes, that the villagers from Zambia can sue that corporation in the United Kingdom. Now, all these mechanisms of having to go to United Kingdom or go to Netherlands or go to United States to sue the head office of corporations is very difficult for poor communities. And so because of the level of poverty and inconvenience and inability to break into those spaces, a lot of cases are not taken up. But if you have the crime of ecocide recognized and the legal system set in motion, corporations would face a lot more call for accountability through that space. Next slide. Now, I just want to talk briefly on carbon and climate crimes. There are a lot of games being played on climate change, currently speaking. If you look at the Paris Agreement and discussions by countries around global warming, people talk about net zero, which we do know it does not mean zero. It just means you keep on releasing greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, the pollution, and while you offset that pollution in trees, maybe in Asia, in Africa, Latin America, or somewhere else in the world, without stopping the pollution at source. That can at best be a postponing the crisis to a future date, to future generations, and in itself, it's an intergenerational crime. Carbon offsetting does not stop pollution. We have to look for ways to stop pollution at source, and this is when the law of ecocide can come to help. Now, apart from offsetting, we have techno-fixes like what is proposed by climate engineers or geoengineers or for solar radiation management, either by putting mirrors in the sky, putting sunshades in the sky, seeding the clouds or whitening the clouds by pumping salt water from the seas into the atmosphere to reflect more radiation into the sky, or by seeding the oceans for algae bloom to absorb carbon from the atmosphere, or by genetically engineering trees to be more efficient in terms of photosynthesis, or even genetically engineering trees to have white leaves, so you can have a plantation of white leaves that will reflect heat into the atmosphere. But in all these cases, you cannot carry out this experiment on a small scale. They have to be carried out on a planetary scale. So the computer modeling is beautiful, laboratory experiments beautiful, but to test this out, they will not respect national boundaries or regional boundaries. They'll be very extensive, thereby impacting the rights of the people. And if anything goes wrong, to reverse the harm would be almost impossible. Even in cases where people propose equipment to capture pollution and then bury carbon capture and sequestration, it would mean burying the carbon either in the bedrock, in rocks, in formation below the sea, or in tanks kept somewhere. All this mean postponing action, because eventually whatever is buried whatever is physical is buried would not last forever. We do know this. Everything that is man-made has a lifespan. It may be 1 million years, but it's going to fail at last. And what will be the implication? And what will be implication for future generations of humans if there will be humans on the planet by that time? So we need real action. And there are also what is the nature-based solution, which some people have described as nature-based seduction. It's all about manipulating Mother Earth, about plantations, about grabbing, land grab that may take up to continental scale. So it's going to mean who would be excluded from utilizing natural resources, what nature has given us, and who would be excluded from enjoying it. So there are layers of discussion that need to be had before any of these kind of games are permitted. Next slide, please. Ecocide law would help to remove the veil. Next slide, please. Ecocide law would help to remove the veil, the corporate veil that makes corporations claim rights while avoiding responsibility. And so when ecocide becomes a law, just like the other laws, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and crimes of aggression, if ecocide becomes the fifth law, then individuals who lead governments, presidents and governors, and directors of corporations can be held individually accountable for the actions that they permitted in their territories or anywhere in the world. So the corporate veil will be removed and accountability will be enhanced. I don't know if you're still hearing me. I'm now on the last. I would like to speak on the last slide. If you're still hearing me, I can do that. If you are hearing me, we don't have to share the slide. I talk about ecological accountability. And my final presentation is that there are certain things that we have to recognize as very important in our fight for ecocide to become a law and to make it operational. Number one is that a lot of the criminal activities in terms of environmental damage is carried out due to, is based on the basis of environmental racism. Racism, those who run this, who permit and who carry out these horrendous harms and ecological damage are doing so in a way that they cannot do if it affected them individually. So there are racist activities, and we have to recognize that this kind of racism do exist in the world today. Secondly, the whole idea of destructive extraction has colonial roots, and we have to tackle neocolonialism in order to expose the root causes of these issues like plantation, agriculture, massive extraction for export, and even the infrastructures that promote this kind of extraction and transformation. The other factor that we need to consider is massive inequality in the world today. It's all about geopolitics, about who controls power and who decides what is being done. There's also gender discrimination, and of course, ecocide itself. So we need to collectively, and I believe this is what this webinar series is helping to do, to decolonize narrative for those who are impacted to tell their own stories, so that when we look at resources as being valuable, as being this, as being, when we permit massive damage because of perceived benefits, we have to understand that somebody, somewhere has a story to tell of the damage that has been done. If we have ecocide law, it will help to build resilience. It will help to defend communities. It will help to stop this destructive extraction. And in all this, those who are suffering the harm would not only look at policies, but they will also be engaged in politics. And so engagement in politics, in political activities, helps those in politics to shape the ideas that drives governance. And this brings policies that are directly suitable and useful for those who are otherwise on the wrong end of the stick, who are suffering the harms and getting little or no benefit from what is happening in their environment. So this, in sum, is my presentation today, talking about ecocide law for environmental justice. The law will be a potent tool for communities and for individuals and for nations to hold those who've been carrying out destructive activities accountable, and this would bring justice. for climate change issues. It would bring about payment of climate debt so that countries who have taken up the carbon budget, who have taken up the space in the atmosphere with all the greenhouse gases and deflected the harm to vulnerable territories who are also demanded to take the basic climate action, this kind of equation will be resolved in favor of the victims. So ecocide law is extremely important, and it should be an urgent concern for citizens of planet Earth. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much for a good presentation, Nemo. And
Thank you so much.
I, uh, I have a question like how far our environmental laws are very effective in Nigeria?
Thank you for that question. We have a lot of laws and policies governing behaviors in the environment. Many of these laws and policies are not enforced. So even where we have good laws, we have requirements for environmental impact assessment. We have laws that require consultation with communities before activities are carried out in the environment, but these are not taken up very religiously and seriously. With regard to the extractive oil sector, oil and gas sector, which is the most polluting sector in Nigeria, all the laws governing that sector were drawn up at a time when the nation was under civil war. And the territory where the oil is found was a conquered area. So the laws don't really have consideration for the environment or for the people from that sector. And this is something that there's still a struggle to recover, to correct this. And then we also have the problem where extractive activities in the oil sector, oil and gas sector, are carried out by transnational corporations and national companies in conjunction with the government. There's no situation where the corporation acts alone. They act in joint partnership with government, which means that when they commit offenses, they have to be accountable, both the corporation and the government. And if you have the government making the law and also enforcing the law and also being the aggressor in the system, you can just imagine that those laws cannot be effectively enforced. So in summary, that is the irony of the paradoxical situation that we have in Nigeria. But we do have very good policies, and we have some laws like the Solid Mineral Act that was made in 2007. That law fully considers the environment as well as communities and the impacts on them. But as I said, implementation is a problem.
Okay. So, according to you, which country sets an example for the successful environmental laws, not just laws, but its real implementation at the grassroots level? So, which, according to you, is the country that sets an example or region that sets an example for successful implementing of environmental laws?
Oh my goodness, that's a difficult thing to say, because in all cases, even when in almost everywhere, it's always a struggle for those who are impacted by activities in the environment to gain law. So it's very hard to find which countries are practicing in the best possible way. But what I would like to say is that some countries have the recognition of the rights of nature, the rights of Mother Earth in their constitution. For example, in Ecuador, their 2008 constitution recognizes the right of Mother Earth, and that is very important. We have similar provisions in the constitution of Bolivia. I think those are first steps when people recognize the fact that you cannot just damage the planet, you cannot damage nature without being held to account, and that nature must be preserved and protected as much as possible. So we have those. Now, I'm not saying that those countries are implementing the best environmental laws. No, they are not, because we've seen that politicians in those countries also depend a lot on extractivism, and sometimes come into direct conflict with communities and with people who rely or depend a lot on the environment. So everywhere around the world, the struggle for environmental responsibility is going on. And you could find pockets of territories and communities where communities use indigenous knowledge, they use traditional norms to protect the environment. For example, in Nigeria, communities who protect their forests keep their forests in much better shape than forests that are protected by national law. The ones by community custom are better protected because communities have a way of relating with the environment in a way that sustains their livelihoods, provides medicine for them, provides space for recreation, provides space for education, provides space for their spirituality, and has a lot of provides food also and cultural activities, and people have a lot of incentive to protect the environment in that manner. You also agree with me that many of the international spaces that we have, for example, the Conference of Parties negotiating for climate change for over 26 years now, negotiation is going downhill, not uphill. Countries are looking for how to avoid responsibility. Even recently, 2 days ago, the International Energy Agency declared that the world had to shift away from investing in new fossil fuel resources. But I bet you, the industry and governments who believe they can squeeze the last drop from the barrel would want to press on to barrel down rather than listening to common sense and stopping the harms that the world is exposed to.
Okay. Thank you for your response. And I just want to know, is there any climate action plan in Nigeria, uh, or if it is, then how far it is successful? Right.
Well, Nigeria has a very robust climate change policy. We also have very good environmental policies, and there are good recommendations for intent for many things, including how environmental resources are utilized, how they are transformed, including how food is being produced, how pollution must be avoided, and of course, the nationally determined contributions to, according to the Paris Agreement, also produced by Nigeria, provides for investment in renewable energy, provides for halting some of the harms that I presented, like gas flaring, to stop gas flaring or to reduce gas flaring, and how to handle many other things adequately. So we have those mechanisms that can be, the issue now is to enforce those mechanisms. And so there are a lot of campaigns by communities to demand that the laws should be enforced. Some have had to go to court locally. For example, in 2005, there was a court ruling in Nigeria that gas flaring is illegal and it's against the human rights of people, the communities, and it should be stopped. So there are many, getting these beautiful policies implemented and enforced is just a burden placed on communities. The law is very adversarial. When you go to court to claim that you've been harmed, you have the duty of proving that you've been harmed, even when the harm is so evident that many communities don't have the expertise, they don't have the funds to pay for experts to speak on their behalf, to produce the evidence. So what some of us are doing now with communities to have paralegal training where communities would learn how to collect evidence that can be utilized in litigation. And we're believing that in future, in the short term, we'll get to a position where those hurdles raised by the need to prove beyond reasonable doubt, even when you are harmed, those hurdles will be overcome.
Even in India also, we do have a climate action plans. Like today also, I'm reading an article in which some of the states are considered highly vulnerable to climate change, and Bihar is one of that state where northern Bihar is being affected by the floods, and southern Bihar is being flooded by the drought. So, and Assam and other regions are considered as a highly vulnerable to climate change. They do have a climate action plan, but they are not successful because of huge population. because of some kind of government schemes that are still not being implemented in the states of Bihar per se. So such kind of things are there. In India, we have only northeastern states when it comes to Tripura, Mizoram, and Meghalaya. They are successful in implementing climate action plans, and they have banned the pesticides completely, and they go organic, and they have started community based programs in which community or the villagers, they are for generating self help and self help groups. They have employed themselves in handicraft items and their products. So in India, there is only northeastern region, Tripura, Meghalaya, Manipur, Mizoram. They are quite successful so far in implementing of this uh, uh, climate action plan. So, in your region, I would like to know that is there any region specifically or province that are like successful in so far in protecting the environment and implementing the climate policies that you people have, like they have banned pesticides completely in a state, they will not the pesticides.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for the example and explanation about the situation in India. I'm really happy to hear that there's some regions where those kind of actions are being taken. Unfortunately, I'm looking for good examples to give you. The good example I will give you for Nigeria is that communities are coming together to protect their environments, and they're doing this successfully or facing very difficult circumstances and always having to campaign to stop destructive activities. We have communities who are managing their forest, and this is very important. I mentioned earlier, and those are examples of properly the managed forest. Nigeria has lost about more than 90% of the original forest cover. So what is left is extremely important, both for socioeconomic usage and also for climate change. And so the ones that have been managed by communities, they are still in the best shape possible. But let me tell you also the situation in Northeast. You told me about Northeast India. Let me tell you about Northeast Nigeria. At Northeastern Nigeria, we have the largest freshwater lake in West Africa. That lake is shared by 4 countries, by Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger Republic. But the lake basin extends beyond these countries up to Central African Republic. Now, unfortunately, there are also fossil fuel resources in that area, so the area has become destabilized. To start with, the lake itself, because of global warming, the lake has reduced in size from 25,000 square kilometers in the 1960s to less than 2,500 square kilometers. Large numbers of pastoralists, of fishers, and farmers. And so when you hear of violent conflicts in northeastern Nigeria, it also has a climate change component. In that kind of conflict situation where people are displaced, they are climate refugees, internally displaced persons, and now you have sectarian violence emanating from this. Sometimes it's very easy to attribute the violence to religious reasons and other reasons, but not look at the climate reason. So again, just to emphasize the fact that if we pay particular attention to ensure that the environment is protected, a lot of conflicts will also be avoided. The African Union has proposed the creation of a great green wall that goes from East Africa to West Africa, from Djibouti in East Africa to Dakar, Senegal in West Africa. That belt is supposed to be about 15 kilometers thick, and in the Nigerian it crosses northern Nigeria that is impacted in region that is impacted by increased desertification. So it's expected that if indigenous trees, economic trees, and other trees, food trees, trees with fruits that people can utilize, are planted in that green belt, it could actually create a big belt across Africa that would positively impact global warming in terms of reducing the negative impact of global warming, and also creating a zone of economic activities across the Sahel of Africa, making the environment better, protecting the water bodies, reducing violence, reducing droughts and desertification, and generally just giving the environment a season of revival, of restoration, and of providing well-being to the people at the same time. So what I'm saying is that there are few places you can pick out as actually where climate action is already having positive impact, or positive actions are being taken, but there's a hope for a continent-wide action that could be of immense benefit, not just for Africa, but globally, because the impact will be global.
Thank you very much. It's time to conclude the presentation. So we have started our presentation with the saying that so many activities are going in the environment that is damaging the environment, and workers are being killed because they are asked for the better working conditions. So you have said, then you raise a question, define the crime, which you said extensive damage to the environment of 10 impacting the soil, the air and water of affected areas in an irreversible ways. And ecocide is the mass damage and destruction of ecosystem and harm to nature. Then we have discussed about the Rome Statute, that the International Criminal Court, four crimes are being recognized internationally: war crime, genocide, crime against humanity, crime of aggression. And destructive extraction is a widespread damage to the environment from mining, oil and gas extraction overlooked in the international criminal law, and human life is made impossible to survive. And then you mentioned about the Polly Higgins, who promoted ecocide, and through the push for, and he pushed for the United Nations to accept the ecocide as a crime. And ecocide will not be retroactive. We have seen crime pictures. You have shown us some crime pictures in which you have shown us that how environment is being impacted and damaged. And 1300 oil spills in 2018 to 19 occurred, and all these harms leads to resistance movement. And climate change conferences like Paris and other conferences are not so far successful in terms of pointing out responsibility, and there is no consensus at international level. So there should be ecological accountability. So that's the thing. So I would like to thank you for giving us such a good presentation and for your presence in Parul University. I would like to thank you on behalf of everyone who is a part of Parul University. So now I would like Ramesh Rawat sir to give final vote of thanks. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me?
I hear you. I hear you clearly.
Yes, sorry, because we delay in the beginning for the 5 to 7 minute, because we have some meeting. And thank you very much, sir. But sir, I have the questions on the today's webinar topic. So, can you more focus on the global environmental justice, sir? Can you hear me,
You have
sir?
not heard. No, I did
Can you
not
hear
hear
me,
you.
sir?
I hear you
Yes,
now.
sir. Yes, sir. My request to you, can you focus 1 or 2 minutes on the global environmental justice? Uh,
Oh,
so,
okay. Okay.
yes.
Definitely. Thank you so much. The I think when I got towards my last slide, I was actually focusing broadly on the environment, on a more a global platform about the fact that we need to have ecological accountability in the world. The economic, the environmental problems in the world today have increased and persisted because of the unjust international division of labor, where certain regions as earmarked as providers of natural resources, and other regions are the processors, those who process these resources, and the extraction is carried out in a very destructive manner. And because there's no international law to hold people to account, they actually get away with these crimes. And so we still have the climate negotiations and the Convention for Biodiversity negotiations. They all show very clearly the difficulties in having a plain playing field globally. We're still having very unjust relationships where certain nations consider themselves to be above the law, and certain corporations are so powerful, they are more powerful than nations. And so globally, we don't have a collective decision to take real action. I mentioned this, and the climate change issue really gives a very good example, where previously we had countries were required to cut emissions as demanded by science. But now what we have is nationally determined contributions. In other words, countries can decide what is convenient for them to do, what level of emission reduction they should carry out. And because of this, nobody really cares about what happens cumulatively to the whole planet. And this is very, very harmful indeed, because it places the planet and the people at great risk, because there's no cohesion, there's no harmony in terms of determination about what action is taken and who must take what action. Initially, even in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, we have the common but differentiated responsibilities principle. But this principle is just merely on paper these days. Everybody's trying to avoid responsibility, and this is very harmful for the planet. And of course, also dependence on fossil fuel-driven civilization, even when we know that this is creating a lot of harm on the planet. This is another kind of willful determination by many countries in the world today to face the reality of the actions that need to be taken. So when we look around the whole world, we believe that having ecocide recognized as a crime will be a very good incentive to get the world to think again about what needs to be done. Recognizing the rights of Mother Earth, the rights of nature globally, would also provide a very good platform for the world to know that we're all on this planet together and we all have a stake, and that there's no division in terms of political boundaries, geographical boundaries, about where cause and effect would begin and stop, and that we're all in it together. I see a lot, in summary, there's a lot of injustice going on in the world today in terms of environmental handling of environmental issues.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And what do you think what kind of the reform and the policy need to develop for the same, sir?
Yes. I think this is the place for researchers. I believe the Paro University will play a good role in that. We need researchers who have one ear to the ground, to the grassroots, and the other ear in the scientific atmosphere. So as to help bring up policies that respond to what people are feeling on the ground, and also using this to ensure that those who drive political decisions don't just take decisions without the consent or consultation of those who suffer the impact. So policy has a very important role to play, and this policy must be bottom up, not top down.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for your wonderful talk and master talk on today's webinar topic, Ecocide Law for the Environmental Justice. And definitely, sir, you put your valuable inputs, and your participants get benefited for that, and our students and the faculty members. So again, we thank you very much, sir, on behalf of the Parul University, on Parul University Management, on Parul University President, sir, Vice Chancellors and Registrars, sir. We thank you, sir, and we want to see you again and again on PU webinar platform, as well as we want to see you physically, sir. So I am inviting to you, sir, please come and join physically to us and enlighten to our students on various other topic and related from the environmental justice and other topics, sir. So again, thank you, and thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank
giving
you,
the
sir.
opportunity to speak here.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir. Thank you.